It was just the wind, he told himself, trying to ignore the sound of his own breathing. It had to be. There was no one else in the house. The estate had stood empty for years, and he had it all to himself for a few weeks until the others arrived. Until then, he could do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And right now, he wanted to sleep. Adabio rolled over, burying his face in the pillow. The whispers started again, this time closer, as if coming from inside his head. He sat up abruptly, knocking over a lamp in his haste. The crash echoed in the sudden silence that followed. Then the whispering started again, louder now, circling him, taunting him. Adabio picked up the lamp, his hand shaking, and turned on the lights. The room was empty, just as it had been when he arrived, and every day since. He looked around, half expecting to see someone standing in a corner watching him with amusement. But there was no one there, just shadows dancing in the flickering lights. Adabio sighed and lay back down. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he'd been working too hard lately, and his mind was playing tricks on him. He closed his eyes and tried to focus on his breathing, counting backwards from 100 to block out the sounds. But then the whispers started again, slithering through his mind like a venomous snake. They were getting louder now, more insistent, and they weren't just outside his head. He could feel them inside him, echoing his heartbeats, making it seem as though his own blood was screaming his name. What is this place? He thought frantically. Why did they send him here? He remembered the letter, the one that had arrived without a sender, summoning him to the estate, promising answers. But all it had brought him were more questions. Questions that the whispers seemed eager to answer, twisting in his gut like a blade. Get up! But the word echoed in his mind, and then a new voice cut through the whispers. Are you awake? Startled, Adabio turned to where the voice seemed to come from, the fireplace. The flames danced merrily, casting eerie shadows on the wall, but there was no one there. Yes, I'm awake, he replied aloud, surprised by the steadiness of his voice. It was a stupid thing to say, he knew, but in that moment, it felt necessary to prove that he was in control, that he wasn't losing his mind. Or maybe it was to convince himself. Who's there? He called out, his voice echoing in the vast space, and no reply. Only the crackle of the fire and the whispers that seemed to grow louder with each unanswered question. Closer, more insistent. He could feel their presence all around him now, pressing against him like a physical force, suffocating him, panic rising within him. He stumbled out of bed and ran to the door. It was locked. Of course it was locked. Why wouldn't it be locked? He pounded on it, his heart hammering in his chest. He didn't want to stay here another minute. He needed to get out, to escape the whispers and the unseen presence that seemed to be closing in on him. When the pounding didn't get a response, he slid down the door, his back hitting the cold wood. His breaths were coming faster now, shallow and panicked. He could feel the eyes boring into him, and the whispers seemed to swell, drowning out his thoughts. Then he heard another voice, closer this time, right next to him. Don't be afraid, Adabio. The voice was soft, soothing, like a balm to his frayed nerves. Turn around. Slowly, hesitantly, he turned his head. There in the dim light, standing in the doorway, was a woman. She was tall and slender, her face half hidden in the shadows. Her eyes, though, were like pools of molten gold, and they held a depth of knowledge that seemed to stretch back centuries. A single strand of silver hair fell across her face, catching the firelight and making it seem as though the very essence of moonlight had been distilled into liquid form. Her gaze was unwavering, intense. It was as though she were reaching into his soul, pulling out his deepest fears and insecurities. And yet there was something about her presence that calmed him, that made him feel safe. Who are you? He whispered, his voice hoarse with disuse. The woman smiled, and it was like the first bloom of spring after a long winter. She stepped forward, and the whispers seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the steady drum of his heart. My name is not important, she said, her voice like the tinkling of bells. What is important is why you are here. Adabio hesitated, torn between his fear and his need for answers. Why am I here? He echoed, knowing the answer would change everything. The woman nodded, her eyes never leaving his. You have questions, she said, and I have the answers. But the truth can be a dangerous thing, Adabio. Are you sure you want to hear it? He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. He knew the truth would change everything, but he also knew he couldn't keep living like this, trapped in a prison of his own making. With a deep breath, he met her eyes. Tell me the truth, he whispered, his voice firm with newfound resolve. The woman smiled again, and this time he saw the sadness in her eyes. Very well, she said, and as the flames danced and flickered in the hearth, she began her tale. Born into the world at the cusp of twilight, Adabio had always felt different. His dreams were filled with images that made no sense, faces that haunted his waking hours, and whispers that promised both comfort and pain. He had tried to ignore them, to bury them deep within him, but they had grown stronger, pulling at him, urging him towards this house, this place that held the answers he so desperately sought. Here, the woman continued, tracing patterns in the dust on the floor with her finger. Time moves differently. Here, the veil between worlds is thin. And here, the whispers become voices, his voices. Memories flooded back. Memories he had buried deep within him, trying to forget. He remembered the day his father had brought the box home, the strange symbols carved into the wood, the air growing heavy with an otherworldly energy as soon as he laid his hands on it. He remembered the voices then, clear and distinct, calling out to him. And he remembered his father's reaction, the sudden wild look in his eyes, the crazed smile that split his face. That's mine, he had said, clutching the box to his chest. No one else can touch it. Not you, Adabio. Not anyone. And then his father had vanished, leaving Adabio with the box and the voices, which had become a constant torment. So this house, Adabio whispered, his voice shaking. This is where my father went. The woman nodded, her eyes filled with pity. Your father sought knowledge, power, a way to control the very forces that govern our world. He found it here, but at what cost? As the first rays of dawn began to peek through the gaps in the curtains, the woman revealed the final truth. Adabio, you have a choice to make. You can embrace the darkness that has been thrust upon you and become something powerful, something feared, or you can reject it, walk away from this place, and try to live a normal life. But either way, there is no turning back. The whispers will find you wherever you go. The only question is, who will you become? Adabio stood at the crossroads of his life, the path ahead shrouded in mist, the echoes of his past and the whispers of his future intertwined, making it difficult to discern one from the other. The decision he made in that moment would shape not only his destiny, but the fate of those around him. For he was not just a pawn in a game far greater than he could have imagined. He was its key. The whispers had been guiding him all along, leading him to this very moment. And as he reached out to grasp the nebulous threads of his fate, he realized that the true battle had just begun.